The verbless exclamatives are a special kind of reduced sentences with a very syntactic and semantic distributional restriction and a rigid intonation control. Like other exclamatives, they convey a surprising effect, differing from both statement and question. Unlike interrogatives, their prototypical function is not asking for information, and while the assertive meaning is informative, the exclamative one is expressive. Exclamatives are factive because they presuppose a propositional content. They contain a scalar implicature of highest degree. Nonverbal exclamatives are present in many Romance languages. They are a kind of reduced sentences without verb and without WH word. Look at this example. Interessante questo film. Interesting this film. Verbless exclamatives show rigid distributional restriction that involve both the complements. They have a fixed order that cannot be changed. The predicate phrase, which has normally an adjectival nature, is moved from its canonical position to the beginning of the sentence, while the grammatical subject undergoes a process of marginalization. Another restriction concerns the selection of lexical form. The anteposed complement must hold evaluative adjectives, that is, adjectives which have a strong affective connotation and are appropriate in an exclamative context, or by a noun precedes by an indefinite article. In a certain sense, it must induce a personal emotional reaction in order to be congruent with the effective nature of the exclamative sentence. On the other side, the subject, the grammatical subject, needs to carry demonstrative or deictic determiners. Indefinite lexical form are not allowed. And last, WH word, if present, is always che, what, while the missing verb is some form of to be or to have. As regards pragmatics, verbless exclamatives have the fixed order too. It is never a neutral appearance. They have always an intrinsic expressive nature, a marked syntactic organization, and a rigid information structure. With reference to the information structure, the predicate phrase transmits the focus, the portion which is new and relevant. Diversely, the grammatical subject conveys a given and presupposed meaning. And we have the opposition between new, the adjective, the anteposed adjective, and given, the subject that is placed in the right periphery of the sentence. Prosodic receive little attention so far. On this topic, there are only some information can be deduced from Munaro, and on this topic there is a recent experimental research written by myself. This research aims to investigate the intonation of Italian nonverbal exclamative, adopting a spectroacoustical perspective. We think that the presence of a marked syntactic and information structure has a strong effect on the intonation contour of these in reduced sentences. And I suggest that verbless exclamatives have a rigid intonation structure too. 5 participants of a southern variety of Italian, aged between 22 and 30, were involved in a reading task. They produced 50 verbless exclamatives without copula and wh word, embedded in short scenarios constructed to simulate appropriate pragmatic context. Each target sentence was compared with assertive and wh exclamative. As this image, you can see the sentence drift. There is a sort of continuous reduction from the assertive to the verbless exclamative. Spectroacoustic analysis was made by means of a Pratt. The following parameters were considered: F0 mean, minimum, maximum, pitch range, speaking rate, duration of stressed vowels, and pitch range and boundary tone were identified and labeled according to the TOBI system. Verbless exclamatives differ from the control sentences because they show a falling intonation contour, greater pitch range, higher F0 initial value, high values of intensity, and a different intonational phrasing. Verbless exclamatives display a slow speaking rate than the other control sentences. In detail, the difference, which is statistically significant, is about 3 syllables respect to the assertive. And let's consider duration. Duration is another feature that helps to distinguish verbless exclamatives from the control sentences. In particular, the most important difference concerns the length of nuclear stressed vowels. These vowels is immediately longer than those present in assertives or wh exclamatives. Verbless exclamatives have a greater pitch range. The predicative complement, together with the dilation of the copula, contributes to create a rhythmic and prosodic breath. The most interesting aspect is that verbless exclamatives are formed by 2 opposite intonational phrases. The predicative complement these show a large pitch span, in average 11 semitones. On the contrary, the grammatical subject is characterized by a narrow pitch excursion, only 3 semitones. This result is not surprising because it is congruent with the information structure of the sentence. But there is another interesting aspect. Verbless exclamatives are not all the same. In my corpus, some express a positive attitude, others a negative one. And this strongly affects the amplitude of the pitch range, because verbless exclamatives that transmit a positive surprise realize a wide pitch range, while on the contrary, the exclamative with a negative emotional polarity show a narrow pitch range. Okay, the intonation contour, the pattern of verbless exclamatives is formed by 2 opposed phrase separated by an intermediate accent. The predicate complement is the only prominent portion of the sentence and receives the most salient speech accent. In line with its expressive meaning, the proposed adjectival constituent presents an extra high level, high star or low plus high star, followed by a steep fall that ends with a low intermediate accent. Between the predicate complement and the subject one, there is the obligatory presence of an intonational break, a low intonational break. On the contrary, the subject is prosodically distressed and separated from the predicate by a slight intonation break, and it is characterized by a flat intonation contour. The subject only shows a low intonation pattern, a low star in corresponding to the nuclear stressed vowel, and the bantory tone is low too. There is no a considerable movement within the stressed vowel, and also the pitch range is very narrow. To conclude, and this is perfectly congruent with the information structure of this reduced sentence, because the new information receives an extra activation of all acoustical parameters when while the subject that transmits a given information show a different behavior. To conclude, in information and prosodic structures establish a strong relationship. They present, in fact, a polarized behavior. The marked position of the predicative constituent has a deep effect on the other level. The predicative phrase, which is anteposed to the subject, are opposed to prominence. It presents a large pitch excursion, high intensity, longer duration, a dynamic F0 contour, but also it differs because for a high degree of emotional arousal. The opposite value we can find are present in the second complement, the subject, which is distressed. And sorry? Okay. It's possible to say that in Italian language, verbless exclamative are a type of nonverbal construction with a syntactic and information and intonation fixed order. Both pragmatic and prosodic properties contribute to make verbless exclamatives a rigid and marked sentential structure. For the future, I think that it's necessary to analyze in a contrastive perspective Italian verbless exclamative with those that occur in other Romance languages in order to ascertain analogies or eventually an alternative difference between in order to find the interlinguistic differences. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Patrizia. For any questions, please raise your hand. Professor Bottinis.
can hear.
Hello. Hello, Patrizia. Thank you very much indeed. I'm surprised. I mean, I haven't seen these things you presented, and I am surprised for two reasons. The one, we didn't know about all this, and the second, your intonation patterns. I mean, I would have expected that when you have topicalization, che buona questa torta, oppure buona questa torta, I would have expected that you have two phrases and you are doing some type of resetting. That is, che buona would be one phrase, and the other phrase with a variability in the content. What you show us here, it is as if the topicalized item is just the fourth item in one phrase, which is very peculiar, very interesting. Or you might...
Okay, thank you. I can hear you well.
Can you hear me?
No, I can hear you well, but I compare
One more.
two exclamative construction.
Are you sure that this structure you show us is the regular structure, or speakers have two possibilities? One to pronounce the whole material in an intonation phrase, and an alternative to break it in two intonation phrases.
Okay, no, in my research, verbless exclamative presents only one intonation contour. It's very rigid. One constituent shows a Greek prominence, and the second is the stressed. And there is always an intermediate break, intonation break, to the between the two constituents. But there is a difference because the exclamative, the WH exclamative, che buona questa torta, show a different intonation phrasing and a different intonation contour.
Well, we are happy we have your paper in our proceedings. We will have the final version in a few weeks, and we will upload everywhere in in our site, ResearchGate, etc., etc. But I would suggest that you write more on this area and you publish more, because it's very interesting and we didn't know about those things.
Okay, I consider this. Thank you very much for your suggestion.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Marco.
Hi, Patrizia. Thank you very much for your talk. I found it very interesting the fact that you have shown a sentence type which does not have the post-nuclear pitch accent as a copy of the nuclear accent. I didn't think about those exclamatives, but they are just de-accented because the given element is mandatory.
Audio. I can hear you well. I have an echo.
Okay, I'll try to speak slow. I found it interesting that the post-nuclear pitch accent is not a copy of the nuclear pitch accent as it happens in many sentence types in Italian, in many varieties of Italian. And also I was wondering about the negative judgment adjectives such as noioso. Besides having a shorter duration, can you also have another nuclear pitch accent, like a descending one, a falling one?
Okay.
In Cosenza Italian?
Cosenza Italian is a southern variety of Italian, and duration has a very strong effect. If
itself.
I want to okay, to see, to show something about the duration. Look at these sentences which have an intrinsic expressive nature. This duration is more and more important. And I want to see you.
Patrizia, sorry. My question was in the negative value judgment, okay, the noioso questo libro. Do you still have L plus H star as a pitch accent, as a nuclear pitch accent, or may you have another pitch accent?
I don't hear you. Okay, in noioso, in the negative polarity exclamative, but there is the same situation.
Same pitch accent.
Only the pitch range show a difference.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.